Psalms 113:9. He maketh the barren woman to keep house and be the joyful mother of children. That's where this all started. My wife has had 12 miscarriages, and she wanted nothing more but to be a mom. Now, back in 2012, probably in about April, we had just spent some time up north with her mom and dad, and it was an unusually warm March. When we got back, we received a phone call from a friend of ours who said, would you consider adoption? And as much as my wife wanted to be a mom, she came to me and she said, somebody's talking about adoption. There's this gal who has been pretty much told by the court that they're going to take away her baby once it's born because she had OD'd and put the baby's life in danger. And knowing how much she wanted to be a mom, I said, well, let's go for it. And I called up an attorney friend of ours, and I said, look, I can't really pay you. I work at a ministry at this point in time, and I'm volunteering. But we need some advice and some help. And she said, well, what I can do is I can give you direction. You'll have to do all the legwork. You'll have to take care of any business that needs to be taken care of. And so we proceeded on that basis, and she didn't charge us anything. And she would give us some advice from time to time, and we would follow that advice until we ran into a brick wall or dead end or whatever you would call it. And during that time, we ended up contacting several adoption agencies to find out some ins and outs of things. And, of course, they asked questions and we gave them answers so that they could better answer our questions. Anyway, as the summer proceeded and we got closer to this due date, which was in October, several different things happened. The gal went through rehab, and when she got out of rehab, she needed a place to stay, and she ended up staying with us. And one of the things that happened in September was that my uncle passed away on the 10th of September. And my mom and dad were in Hong Kong at the time. And so plans were made and a memorial was set for some time in October for my mom to come back and be at this memorial for her brother. And anyway, things proceeded. I tried to get help this gal get a job so that she could, have some sort of income and stuff. And at that point in time, things didn't really work out. And in the meantime, as we were proceeding with trying to finalize our plans for the adoption, things weren't working out in that area either. And along about the weekend that we were supposed to be having this baby, I believe it was a Friday afternoon, because a friend of mine from Australia had come to visit, and we were sitting in a little kind of a cafe kind of place inside of a grocery store. And he was telling me about things that had to do with, where he was living and stuff like that. And he had had a rough time since he had gotten back. They had gone out to dinner the previous night, or maybe 2 nights before that, and on their way back, they had ended up getting in an accident, and one of his friends had broken a leg and was in the hospital getting surgery that afternoon while we were sitting there. And what happened was that while we were sitting there, I got a phone call from the lawyer, and I went out to take the phone call, and she said, you guys really need to just chalk this up to experience. You're not going to get the baby. And I was pretty devastated because, how do you go home and tell your wife that, when she's wanted kids for so long? But I did, and we proceeded, and by Sunday, the gal decided that she wanted, that it was time, and so Sunday night we went there to the hospital, and she was in the hospital all night. And in the middle of the night, for some reason, she changed what she wanted the baby's name to be. And my wife came and said, well, she changed what she wanted the baby's name to be to Isaac James instead of Damian Ray. And I was like, wow, okay, that's quite a switch. And I was not unhappy, because I was thinking, well, Damien, the only Damien I knew at that point in time was the Omen. And I'm thinking, well, I can't possibly watch over this kid be thinking of the Omen all the time. And so she changed his name to Isaac James, and I was like, well, that's good. But I was still really perturbed, and she had the baby, and I went home after, having to spend all night in the waiting room and not really getting very much sleep and everything. And I went home to take a shower, and I had this just frustration inside of me, and I said, this isn't right, God. We've done everything that we can. This is what I believe should happen. And it was like God spoke to me. He said, what's the child's name? And I said, Isaac James. This is all going on in my head. And it was like he gave me this epiphany. Your mom's here for her brother. Her brother's name was James, and James had passed away the month before. And for whatever reason, to me, that meant the baby's gonna come home with you. And 3 days later, the gal signed over a power of attorney to us, concerning the baby, and we were able to take that baby home. And we had that baby in our house for 7 weeks to the day. And I got out of work at, I don't know, like 4 o'clock in the afternoon or something like that, or 3. And I received a phone call before I made it to my car in the parking lot. And lo and behold, one of the adoption agencies that we had spoken with had somehow managed to use the information that we gave them to get a hold of this gal and change her mind about who she wanted to have the baby. And they said, you know, we got CPS, we got the police coming, we're going to be at your house in 20 minutes, and you need to give the baby up to us now. Well, I just went over to my wife. She was babysitting at a different spot, and she had the baby with her. And I literally had to pry the baby out of her hands and put him in the car carrier and drive him back over to our house to meet up with the police and CPS and everybody and hand the baby over to them. And I knew as soon as they said that I couldn't rebel, and I couldn't, obviously I could, take the baby and run, but I knew that wasn't really an option. And so as I handed the baby over, I'm thinking, what am I going to do, And that night, I went to prayer meeting. I had been a regular attendee at prayer meeting, so it wasn't a big thing, but we had been bringing Isaac James to prayer meeting for 7 weeks, and they wanted to know where Isaac James was when I got there and where Jessica was. And I told them the story of what had happened, and they were like horrified, and they were like, well, what are you going to do? Are you going to fight this? Are you going to go and, get the baby back and all of this? And I said, something came into my mind, that God had something better in mind. And I said, no, we're not going to do anything. God has something better in mind. And it was really bitter experience. It was a dark time. For the whole month of December, we were just devastated. And in about the middle of January, my wife asked if she could go up and visit her parents again. And that year, luckily, it was fairly I don't know, not so bad of a year as far as snow and bad weather goes. And so I took her up there for a couple of weeks, and then when I got paid again, I came back and got her, and by that time it was probably the first part of February or so. And we went to prayer meeting again, right probably the day or two after I got her back. And when we were in prayer meeting, she's rubbing her stomach. Well, as she's rubbing her stomach, a friend of ours says, you have an ectopic pregnancy. And she's like, no, I was up shoveling snow, and I pulled a muscle, and it was pretty snowy up at my mom and dad's, and I did a lot of work, and that's why my stomach is hurting. And I was kind of perturbed at the gal because, who says to somebody that's had 12 miscarriages, oh, you have an ectopic pregnancy, which is for those of you who don't know, is a tubular pregnancy, which endangers the life of the baby and the mother, especially if they can't get it out. Anyway, then the friend who called her about the adoption was there, and she went out and bought a pregnancy test and brought it over to our house that very night. And I was really torqued, because I'm like, are you kidding me? You're gonna really do this and put my wife through this kind of stuff again after all of everything that we've been through? But I gave my wife the test, and she says, she goes into the bathroom, and from the other side of the door, I hear, "Uh-oh." And when she said that, it was so weird. Instead of being anxious or worried, I was like at peace, at total peace. I knew that that baby was going to be born and it was going to be fine. And that baby's name was Seth. He's our firstborn, and he's going to be turning 11 years old on September 10th of this year, which coincided with the exact day that my Uncle Jim died the year before. You know, we go through sometimes horrific things, but if we can figure out how to let God do what God does, He's going to make something better happen than even we can imagine. I hope this story encourages you guys and gives you hope in your lives, whatever's going on with your circumstances. Anyway, that's my 2 cents for the day. Thanks for watching. God bless, and see you next time.